This is the Unique Scotland podcast with exclusive scottishvisits.co.uk.
Hello, this is John Harbour from Exclusive Scottish Visits, and welcome to my May 2024 Letter from Scotland, the Unique Scotland podcast that brings you the latest news from this wonderful country that puts the great into Britain. This newsletter gives you an insight into what makes this tiny country tick. It takes newsprint, TV and radio commentary and turns it into a bite-sized viewpoint from a local perspective with a slightly humorous edge. In today's Letter from Scotland, you will be updated on issues that I reported on in the February Letter from Scotland edition. So if you've not yet listened to it, then you must be mad. Go back and hear all about Scotland's newsiest items, including the political scandals presently surging through the Scottish Parliament, and especially a hate crime bill which appears to be universally hated. I'll be updating you on the escaped macaque monkey from the Highland Wildlife Centre, the ferry shipbuilding fiasco, and the latest on how the Haggis will affect the US presidential elections. In the latest news, we'll look at more political shenanigans with lies and theft at the centre of the Scottish Government. We'll hear about a small Scottish island general store that ordered more Easter eggs than the small population. And we'll also have a look into Dunvegan Castle and how the present chief is trying to keep it intact. And you'll hear the latest on the search for the Loch Ness Monster and how NASA is being involved. And who is Bella the Water Beast lurking around the Forth and Clyde Canal? Is it safe to sail along this iconic waterway? Well, it's all here and much more, so sit back and enjoy your newsletter from Scotland with John Harbour of Exclusive Scottish Visits on the Unique Scotland podcast, the go-to podcast on all things Scotland. You heard it here first, probably. Well, let's begin with a few updates, and I'd like to turn first to Honshu, the 7-year-old Japanese macaque monkey who escaped from a Highland wildlife park at Kingussie and captured the attention of world media. Thankfully, Honshu was captured a few days later by being lured to a bird feeder by a Yorkshire food delicacy called Yorkshire pudding. Well, more than a month after he was captured, Honshu is being moved south from the Highlands to Edinburgh Zoo. It would appear that Honshu is at an age where macaques normally move out of the monkey troop, so it would have been very difficult to bring him back into his wider family circle. Instead, a new mini-troop has been specially created, comprising 3 other male macaques of similar age. He appears to be settling in well, and if you're interested, you can adopt Honshu and his new friends at Edinburgh Zoo. Turning to the US presidential elections, you will recall that I suggested to both candidates in the upcoming US presidential election to ease the restrictions on the importation of haggis, especially with sheep stomach bags. The candidate who dedicated themselves to this cause would surely secure the votes of the 6 million Scottish Americans who reside in the US today. I believe it could have been a vote winner, which could have secured a win for the presidency. Well, I'd like to report that having sent emails to the White House and the Trump camp, I'm pleased to say that I got a reply from Mr. Trump's office, and I quote, "Thank you for writing to President Donald J. Trump. We are carefully reviewing your message. President Trump believes the strength of our country lies in the spirit of the American people and their willingness to stay informed and get involved. He appreciates your taking the time to share your thoughts and sends his best wishes to you and your family." Well, thank you, Mr. Trump's office, for an auto-reply at least, and I look forward to hearing what you say after you've carefully reviewed the message. As for Mr. Biden's office, I look forward to a reply at some stage. In the meantime, I must get this podcast published, so we'll have to wait until the next newsletter from Scotland for any update. You will recall my report on the Ferguson shipyard, where two ferries, the Glen Sannox and the Glen Rosa, ordered for Caledonia McBrain, the company that services the Scottish Islands, were 6 years late and 3 times over budget. I mean, you couldn't really make it up. Well, the Stornoway Gazette has reported that Macaque ferry crew are still without a ship. Now, wait a minute, I hear you say, the unfinished ferries have crews? Well, it appears so, and Brian Wilson from the Gazette has reported on 17th of May that Glen Sannox, which recently headed out for sea trials, has had a fully paid crew in place for at least 2 years. Now, that beggars belief that a ship, clearly not able to sail, has had a crew in place all this time. This has led Caledonia McBrain admitting to spending £3.5 million crewing a vessel that has yet to come into service. And as predicted in my previous letter from Scotland, there are further delays which will mean neither ship will be available for this summer season, leading to more disruption on the island ferry routes this year. And sadly, I can testify to that, as my Scottish tours have been affected twice now, with last-minute cancellations on the route from Macaque to the Isle of Skye. This whole saga is far from over, and of course, there is the question of what happens to the shipyard after this debacle. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. My final update is on the other political story, a police probe called Operation Branchform, and that also beggars belief. And it's about the arrest of the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, and her husband Peter Murrell, and the Scottish Nationalist Party accountant Mr Colin Beattie earlier this year, to answer questions about a missing £600,000 from party funds donated by their members. They were all released without charge. However, you will recall that the police put a cordon around the First Minister's house and took away a motorhome valued at around £100,000 from the driveway of Mr Murrell's mother's house. Well, the latest is that Mr Murrell, the ex-chairman of the Scottish Nationalist Party, was rearrested, questioned for about 9 hours, and has now been formally charged with embezzlement. As is normal in most criminal cases, a report is sent to the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service, which is the US Attorney's Office equivalent in America. Mr Murrell is no longer in police custody, and he will have to wait for the Procurator Fiscal to decide if there's a case to answer. As must we. Watch this space. And now getting on to the latest news affecting this fine country. I'd now like to lighten the subject matter by reporting on a shop owner, Mr Dan Diffid of Sinclair General Stores on the tiny island of Sandy, one of the Orkney Islands that sit off the northern tip of Scotland, who ordered more Easter eggs than the whole population. Dan, who owns the Sinclair General Store, calculated that he would need around 80 Easter eggs for the tiny island population of 500, noting that only the children would be looking for one. However, instead of ordering 80 eggs, he ordered 80 boxes of eggs, and 720 eggs duly arrived. Although initially embarrassed by the mistake, Dan immediately set to work to make up for his mistake and do some good with the over-order. He decided to raffle off 100 eggs, with the proceeds going to the excellent charity, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute. The RNLI, to give it its short title, was founded in 1824. It's based in Poole in the south of England, and they operate more than 400 lifeboats from 238 stations all around Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. It's mainly funded by legacies and donations, and most of its lifeboat crews are unpaid volunteers. So Dan's charitable contribution went to an excellent cause. The RNLI were quoted as saying they were extremely grateful to Dan for his incredibly kind gesture. The winner of the raffle was a Russell Dowland who lives in London, and he decided to share his winnings and give 50 chocolate eggs to the runner-up, who was Maisie Sinclair, who lives on Sandy, would you believe it? Well, on the off chance that Dan might be available, I rang Sinclair General Store on Sandy and was delighted to find him available for a quick chat. Here's how I caught up with him. Hello Dan, and how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us. And I just wanted you to tell us in your words what actually happened with the Easter egg saga.
Yeah, no problem at all. So it's actually been a few weeks since I've discussed this. For a couple of weeks, it was pretty crazy. So we accidentally ordered too many Easter eggs. In order to kind of get rid of these Easter eggs, we came up with the idea of running a competition where people could win 100 Easter eggs. that seemed to go, get a lot of interest, and the idea of us living on a small island where there was more Easter eggs than people really seemed to catch people's imagination. The story went wild. It was all over the world, and next thing you know, we were getting kind of requests for interviews from TV channels globally, which was mind-blowing, really.
Well, certainly we're delighted that you're able to come on the Exclusive Scottish Visits podcast. So it's a small island, and sandy, I believe.
That's right.
And where are you exactly?
So we're the second furthest north island of the Orkney Islands.
Brilliant. And how long you lived there, Dan?
I've been here for just over 2 years.
You now run and own the Sinclair local shop, effectively.
That's it, yeah, Sinclair General Stores, yeah, we're one of 2 shops on the island.
Brilliant. And I believe that you started raising money for the Royal Naval Lifeboat Institute, the RNLI. How did that go?
Yeah, that's right. So, obviously with us being a small island community, the RNLI is something that's close to our hearts here. I think over the years have kind of saved lives and done a lot for our island. So it's a charity that gets supported a lot here, so it just seemed kind of natural that when we were running an event for charity that the money would go to the RNLI.
That sounds fantastic. And roughly how much did you raise?
It was just under £16,000.
That is amazing, considering it's a matter of selling a few Easter eggs. Well, I take it if somebody wanted to contribute, do you still have the website open at all?
I believe the website is open, but if people do want to contribute, the best thing to do would be to go on the RNLI website and donate directly to them. But we'd welcome any donations. It would be wonderful.
Well, that's fantastic. And as an ex-mariner myself, I can thoroughly endorse the great work that the RNLI do. Well, where are you now, Dan? Have all the Easter eggs gone?
Yeah, all the Easter eggs have gone. Believe it or not, we actually ended up ordering more because there was such interest in them. But, they sold out again. And we're Easter eggless, thinking of something crazy to do for next year to raise some money for charity.
That is absolutely amazing. Well, Dan, listen, thank you so much for chatting to us and for letting us know. And considering the slight mistake of, I think, 80 instead of 80 eggs, 80 boxes is phenomenal, especially what you did and the great cause you supported at the end of it as well. So, Dan, thank you so very much indeed for coming on the programme. And can we just say all the very best to all the folk in Sandy. And I hope that your general store continues its good work.
Lovely, thank you very much. Yeah, it was nice that my silly mistake, brought so much good. And it's been lovely to talk to you. And if any of your followers ever come to Sandy, they can pop in and have a cup of tea, and we'd be more than pleased to see them.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. All the very best. Bye-bye for now.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that was Dan Diffid, owner of Sinclair General Stores on the tiny island of Sandy, one of the islands of the Orkneys. Well done to Dan and to everyone who supported the competition, with special thanks to all the Sinclair General Store staff and also John, 59 Degrees North, who donated his time, mugs and T-shirts that were sold to help with the fundraising. And if you would like to help these volunteer seafarers who save lives every day around the shores of the United Kingdom, then go to the Royal National Lifeboat Institute or RNLI website to contribute. And don't forget, if you're in Sandy, pop into the general store to see Dan and his team and mention you heard them on this podcast. When I travel to Skye, I love to visit the impregnable Dunvegan Castle, home to the MacLeod clan chief, which has clung to a massive rock for over 800 years and complements the clan motto, "Hold fast." Indeed, for almost 800 unbroken years, Dunvegan Castle in Skye has been the family seat of Clan MacLeod. Alison Campsey of the Scotsman newspaper has reported that work is underway to ensure the fortress continues to hold fast for the centuries ahead. Unfortunately, part of Dunvegan's mighty rampant wall are now eroding away, and the bedrock on which the castle stands is also deteriorating. A public path around the base of the castle has been closed due to the risk of rockfall, and I saw that recently when I visited. Sadly, the fortress, which is surrounded on 3 sides by water and is battered relentlessly by the weather rolling off the Atlantic, is starting to feel its age. Damage has also been recorded at the castle's fairy tower, which was built in the 15th century by the 8th chief Alistair Crotack, which means the hunchback, and that was after a deal of allegiance was struck with James IV of Scotland. Of course, the most famous artefact within the castle, which you will be glad to hear is safe, is the fairy flag, which was given to one of the clan chiefs after he married a fairy. She had to leave him after 1 year to return to fairyland, but this amazing gift was said to have magical powers that could summon up hundreds of clansmen to fight for the chief if ever the MacLeods were in danger. And that flag can be viewed within the castle. Well, you'll be pleased to hear that permission has now been granted to MacLeod Estates to repair and fortify the ancient structure, make it safe and restore parts of the site which have disappeared as successive clan chiefs sought to make their mark on the castle. And as work gets underway, the MacLeod motto has been deployed. So let's hope that Dunvegan Castle can indeed hold fast for the next 800 years. On Saturday 6th of April 2024, the annual Tartan Day Parade took place in New York as the centrepiece of the Tartan Week calendar, where thousands of Scots diaspora gathered to see a remarkable tartan spectacle of marching pipers and Highland dancers galore. Well, I was tickled by an article in the Edinburgh Reporter by Phyllis Stephen, who reported in early April that the Merchiston Castle School Pipe Band would be attending, and when they board the plane, one of their fathers will definitely be there to greet them, as he will be flying the plane, taking the band and their accompanying teachers to the Big Apple. Captain Simon Rankin will pilot the Virgin Atlantic jet with the pipe band on board, and he said it's a privilege to be flying the Merchiston Castle School Pipe Band to New York, particularly as I am a dad to one of the students. All of us at Virgin Atlantic are delighted to be part of creating such a great experience and memories for all the boys. Kyle Warren, who was the director of Pipe and Drums at Merchiston, said, "It was a privilege to be attending the 26th anniversary of the New York City Tartan Day Parade, with Merchiston's pipe band to celebrate Scottish heritage and culture. What an amazing experience for these school students." Merchiston's Castle School Pipe Band joined more than 3,000 bagpipers, Highland dancers, clan organisations and dog breeds on the march up 6th Avenue in Manhattan as part of the annual celebration of Scottish heritage and culture. As it happens, I am a member of the American Scottish Foundation, one of the organisers of the event. So if you'd like to learn more about this fabulous New York City Tartan Day Parade, then look up the American Scottish Foundation or come and join us for lots of news and views of all things Scottish. And by the way, I'm going to attend next year. See you there. Breaking news. Scotland's First Minister resigns. No, not Nicola Sturgeon that I mentioned in my previous podcast, but her successor, Humza Yousaf, who has only been in post for about 1 year. Let me explain. You will recall from my last newsletter, and the update above, that Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish Nationalist Party leader and the First Minister of Scotland, resigned just before her husband Peter Murrell was arrested for alleged embezzlement. There was an immediate search for a successor, and the Scottish National Party chose Mr Humza Yousaf as their next leader. Well, over the last year, he's not had too much success leading the party or the country, and he's had to cancel a number of proposed laws that he and his predecessor hoped to pass into law. I also mentioned that his government was propped up by a coalition between the Scottish National Party and the Green Party. Well, the Green Party were outraged when he scrapped the 2030 climate targets and also some extremely controversial gender policies. Now, it's obvious that Mr Yousaf foresaw the possibility of the Green Party walking away from the agreement, so, according to some commentators, and to make himself look strong, he decided to end the Bute House Agreement, effectively sacking the leaders of the Green Party from Parliament. Now, this was either a bold or a stupid move, depending upon how you look at it, because it meant that he lost his majority in the House. And sure enough, the opposition parties immediately tabled no confidence motions in him and his government. Well, Yousaf, realising that the game was up and in every likelihood he'd lose a no confidence vote, he resigned. A couple of months have now elapsed and a new leader and First Minister is in place. His name is John Swinney, a veteran Scottish National Party minister. It will be interesting to see how long he lasts, with a few more skeletons starting to slide out of the Scottish Government's closet. Well, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, you probably heard it here first. I have some exciting and more breaking news. As I record this, our Prime Minister of the whole of the United Kingdom, Mr Rishi Sunak, has just announced a general election, meaning the United Kingdom is going to go to the polls on the 4th of July, and I know all my American friends will be celebrating madly. Not our election, of course, but their own Independence Day on the 4th of July 1776, ironically from the British government. Anyway, I'll report on the outcome of the election in my August-September newsletter. You'll recall from previous podcasts, I love to visit my favourite island, the Isle of Mull. And on the journey from Oban to Craignure, which is the main ferry terminal in Mull, I always have a look at Lismore Island, sitting halfway between the two destinations. Lismore is only around 9 square miles, is a fertile, low-lying island with about 200 people who live there. If you'd been there at the beginning of the 20th century, there would have been about 1,000 people, but the population has continued to decline. The modern economy is fishing, farming and tourism. Well, I was delighted to read in the Scottish Field magazine that archaeologists have discovered the lost monastery of St Mullaig on this Isle of Lismore. Ellie Forbes on the 2nd of April reported that for 6 years a team of community archaeologists from the Lismore Historical Society have been searching for answers on the island's past. Just recently, the volunteer team turned their attention to a very unpromising wet field below the parish church, and bingo, they found what they believed to be the site of St Mullaig's lost monastery, with evidence of religion, jewellery making and crafts dating back more than 1,000 years. An oval stone building which was discovered has now been dated to between the 7th and 10th century, confirming the Society's suspicions. Well, a workshop where precious metals were used has been uncovered, as well as evidence of other workers creating fine carvings in stone, wood, bone and antler nearby. Dr. Robert Hay from the Society said, "The find confirms Lismore is now as important as places like Iona." He went on to say that it's now known that an area next to the oval building was the focus of high status and highly skilled metalworking, with the fragments of around 120 crucibles found. Apparently there's been some analysis by the National Museum of Scotland, and they reveal that they were used for melting copper alloys, silver and gold. Now, St Mullaig was born in the northern part of Ireland around 530 AD, making him a contemporary of St Columba of Iona Abbey. It's said he arrived in Lismore around 562 AD before moving up through the west coast of Scotland, evangelising over to the pagan Pictish heartlands in the north and the east. So next to St Columba, a very important figure indeed. And work continues to analyse and conserve the 1,500 significant finds from the site, which are helping to illuminate life in early medieval Scotland. Well, to me, that's brilliant news, and I'll look now upon Lismore with different eyes the next time I'm passing on the way to the wonderful Isle of Mull. I've been asked by some listeners if I can give them more examples of shenanigans. Well, imagine you're on holiday and you have with you the company's iPad to perhaps catch up with some work whilst you're away. Anyway, you're having so much fun you do no work and get on with relaxing in the sun. Now imagine you get home and, having not used the iPad for work, suddenly find that you've accumulated an £11,000, which is nearly $14,000, mobile or cell roaming charges, because in reality your kids somehow got a hold of the iPad, gained access to the classified PIN code and racked up that cost while using it as a Wi-Fi hotspot to watch football. Clearly a dilemma. What would you do? Pay the charge yourself and ground the kids for the next month, reducing their pocket money accordingly? Or instead, claim the expense against the company's account, hoping the accountant would believe your story that you had urgent need to do company business on holiday and this was the cost? Well, sadly, this is exactly the dilemma faced by one of our Scottish nationalist members of the Scottish Parliament, Mr Michael Matheson, who was also a senior cabinet member in the Scottish Government as the Health Secretary. So a man with considerable responsibility to the public. Well, he made the wrong call and decided to claim the outrageous charges on his public expenses. When it came to light a couple of months later, Mr Matheson categorically denied personal use and claimed to journalists that the use of the iPad and the bill he accumulated was due to official work. Not a clever move, Mr Matheson, because as we all know, journalists, like a pack of wolves, will hunt down their prey relentlessly. Sure enough, evidence came to light that the bill was due to personal use, and Mr Matheson finally had to own up. In an emotional statement in Holyrood's Scottish Parliament, he said the costs had been incurred by his teenage sons, who had used the parliamentary iPad as a Wi-Fi hotspot to watch football during a holiday in Morocco. I love the use of the adjective emotional. It means looking down and talking slowly and quivering the lip as if a few tears might drop at any moment. Some other officials who have been caught for other transgressions do have the ability to produce tears, which I think is quite awesome, but it does not detract from the fact that they've stolen or tried to steal from the very people that they're meant to represent. The final result from the Scottish Parliament Standards Committee is that Mr Matheson is suspended for a month and will be fined. Now, there's no mechanism in the Scottish Parliament to sack him, so it's really up to him to do the decent thing and resign. Well, I don't know why, but I get the feeling that this is not going to happen anytime soon. Maybe it's the word decency that I'm having trouble with. From political beasts to water beasts, and this news brings us the story of Bella, the largest water beast ever seen, and it's been unveiled on the Forth and Clyde Canal, and that's the canal that runs from Edinburgh's River Forth and Glasgow's River Clyde. The canal's around 35 miles long and was opened in 1790 to provide an east-west route for seagoing vessels in the days of sail. Its use was limited by 1850, due to the increased size of the ships and the introduction of the railways. But by 1930, the canal was dormant and closed in 1960. Well, in 1980, the Forth and Clyde Canal Waterway Society was formed to campaign for the Forth and Clyde's preservation, restoration and development. Now, at the eastern end of the canal at Falkirk near Edinburgh, and I've mentioned it before, we do have the amazing Kelpies sculpture. And these are mythological water beasts, and they're talked about by grandparents to keep their grandchildren away from the water's edge. Well, at over 360 feet long, Bella the water beast will be bigger than her cousins, the Kelpies. Pauline MacLean, the BBC Scotland arts correspondent, commented that there are few works which can live up to the description groundbreaking, but Bella and the Seven Winds certainly earn her title. Her body, apparently, is made from 1,000 tonnes of soil lifted to build a £14 million Stockingfield Bridge in North Glasgow, and offers a chance to create an art park. Now, Bella is the biggest of 22 artworks commissioned by Scottish Canals for the site, all of which draw on the heritage of the area. And whereas the Kelpies are mythological water horses, Bella is a mythological water serpent. Now, she's decorated with a mosaic of ceramics, symbolising the past industry of the area, and over the next 5 years, Nicol Wheatley will work with Louise Nolan and Ruth Impey of the community organisation Macaque Glasgow to create and attach the thousands of ceramic scales needed for Bella's body. And this really reflects the fact that Scotland used to export its clay products and its ceramic products right across the world. I mean, don't you just love a good news story, especially when it involves mythological beasts? And other good news from the BBC is showing that record numbers of overseas tourists visited Scotland in 2023. Tourism bosses have described record international visitor numbers for Scotland in 2023 as a turning point for the industry. Almost 4 million people from overseas visited the country last year, an increase of 15% on 2019, and that was the year just before COVID pandemic. Unprecedented numbers from North America helped break the previous record of 3.7 million, which was set in 2018. Now, Vicky Miller of Visit Scotland told BBC Scotland News that the figures were a significant milestone for the tourism sector. She estimated that just under 20% of visitors to Scotland now come from international markets. Visit Scotland's own research suggested that visitors are increasingly looking for unique experiences, such as designing tartan or bagpipe lessons, which Miss Miller said reflected a desire for a once-in-a-lifetime holiday. Wellness activities like wild swimming and food and drink trips are also popular, as well as the usual visits to see the Loch Ness Monster and to visit the Isle of Skye or Isle of Mull and Iona Abbey. Well, as it happens, most of my clients come from North America, with some from Asia, Australia and France, making use or perhaps testing my French language skills. Well, last week I had 2 couples from the USA, and this week I'll be welcoming Tony and Anne Gilliani from Australia for a 12-day tour. So my message to the world is that Scotland is very much open for business, so come visit. And if you're not sure, or you can't visit for any other reason, then look at my website for some great photographs to complement my podcasts. Scotland is an amazing country. If you're keen on oysters and you're touring with me, we'll probably end up eating at the Oyster Bar on Loch Fyne, which is about 55 miles north of Glasgow. Well, I was delighted to see on the BBC News, with Daniel Fleming reporting, that rare oysters are being reintroduced to the Firth of Forth, the east coast river that runs past Edinburgh. It would appear that 30,000 rare oysters are being reintroduced to the Firth of Forth, having been wiped out by overfishing and pollution over the past 200 years. I have to say, I always recall when standing on the ramparts of Stirling Castle and regaling clients with stories of William Wallace and Robert the Bruce, that the River Forth can be seen from the castle as it winds its way down the valleys towards Edinburgh and the North Sea. And on a clear day you can actually see the peak of Ben Lomond towering over Loch Lomond some 30 miles away to the west, and you're also looking over the Carse of Stirling. Well, in Scottish geography, a carse is an area of fertile, low-lying land occupying Scottish river valleys such as the River Forth. The Carse offers good agricultural land, but in the past it used to be overlain by peat bogs, much of which has been cleared to improve agriculture. Now, during this clearance process, the peaty soil was thrown into the River Forth, where it was washed downstream and into the North Sea. Unfortunately, it also poisoned the oyster beds. It's been estimated that 30 million European flat oysters were being harvested towards the end of the 1800s, but by 1957 they were declared extinct in the area. Edinburgh's connection to oysters are embedded in local songs and stories, and there are tales of the fishwives of Newhaven and oyster wars where people ventured into each other's territories. They were used as a staple of an otherwise poor diet. And whereas oyster and beef pie is an expensive delicacy today, it was the poor man's choice of yesteryear, albeit a lot more oyster than beef. In those days, the fishermen believed it was good to sing to the oysters as they caught them in a sort of partnership, and there are still choirs today who keep those memories alive and sing the old songs. So it's great news that the waters of the River Forth could once more sustain oysters. So far, 14,000 have been reintroduced with plans for another 16,000 to be added by the end of 2024. Fingers crossed the system works and we may be eating River Forth oysters, environmentally harvested of course, in the next few years. From rivers to the sea to beaches, and I was pleased to read in Time Out about the 11 most beautiful beaches in Scotland. And what I discovered did not surprise me, as I visited most of these listed except for one on my own doorstep, which comes in at number 2. Now, Malcolm Jack gave his assessment, and the top of the list was Luscantire Sands on the Isle of Haggis in the Outer Hebrides, a beach I've visited on many occasions. Indeed, you may find some photos and videos of this beach on my Facebook pages, and there's a great video of one of my previous guests, Marianne, dancing in the surf. She was so taken with the place. I love Malcolm Jack's description in Time Out. It's priceless, as he describes the Scottish weather being famously unpredictable. You can't afford to delay on those precious few days when the sun shines and the temperature soars. Just grab your swimwear and a picnic and make for the coast quick before the rain starts splashing in your sandwiches. Lovely, thank you, Malcolm. Well, I've lost count of the time that I've organised picnics for guests on some fabulously scenic, deserted beach, only to find that a howling gale or lashing rain tries to dampen the enthusiasm. I'm pleased to say that most guests take it in their stride, especially when I tell them that the wind keeps the midges away and gives us wind power, the rain gives us whiskey, and the appalling weather in general allows visitors to have a huge expanse of white sandy beach to themselves. What's to complain about? So, to number 2 on the list was Coldingham Bay in the Scottish borders, which is only 30 miles south of my village here at Aberlady. It's described in Time Out as a perfectly formed crescent of golden sand wrapped in steep hills with a line of brightly coloured beach huts popping in pinks, yellows, turquoises and blues among the dunes. Interestingly enough, I've never taken guests there, but I have walked the beach a number of times on some of my coastal path walks, of which there are many in Scotland. Well, I'll certainly pay more attention next time, and will take you if you wish when you visit and tour with me. My own favourite beach on the mainland of Scotland is West Sands, St Andrews in Fife. It is beautiful golden sand and goes on for miles. This is where the film Chariots of Fire was filmed, and whenever I visit St Andrews, the sound of Vangelis rings out in my ears, and in my mind's eye I can see the slow-motion Olympic team running along the surf. So, a long walk along this beach is a must-do, certainly when you're on tour with me. It helps you clear the mind and calm the soul. Now, some of you may have heard of Mary King's Close on Edinburgh's Royal Mile, an alleyway that's been closed off for 100 years, and it's now open to the public. I'll be talking about that alleyway or close in my next podcast on my walk down the Royal Mile, but I mention it here because a medieval street, hidden for 40 years under the main shopping centre in Stirling, has just been opened up again. Ben MacDonald from the Stirling Courier has reported that Dirt Raw, as it's called, will reopen to the public who will travel back hundreds of years. The street ran along Stirling's old, formidable city walls, which are some of the best preserved in Scotland, and they played a pivotal role in shaping the destiny of the nation. They were built during the rough wooing in the 16th century to deter the English from forcing the infant Mary Queen of Scots into marrying Henry VIII's heir. Dirt Raw is a 16th century street and leads onto a hidden section called the Thieves' Pot. The Stirling Council archaeologist Dr. Murray Cook was quoted as saying, "It's an incredibly atmospheric, disorientating place and I can't wait to explore it." Well, Dr. Cook will be leading tours down into Dirt Raw at a fitting moment when Stirling City will be marking its 900th anniversary. I can't wait to see it for myself. Remaining in Stirling, the home of the most famous castle and the place where William Wallace defeated a much larger English army during the Wars of Independence in 1296. I was absolutely delighted to read in the Scotsman newspaper that a remarkable 16th century handwritten manuscript about Sir William Wallace had been put up for auction. Not that I can afford to buy it with a price tag of around £250,000, but that more information has come to light about this extraordinary man and hero of Scotland. Paul Wilson from the Scotsman has reported that Latin texts contain previously unknown information about the exploits of the legendary warrior. One of the numerous new discoveries was the exact date, 3rd of May 1297, when the freedom fighter killed the English sheriff of Lanark, William Heselrigg. Now, you'll all probably remember the incident from the film Braveheart when Wallace discovered that the sheriff of Lanark, William Heselrigg, killed Wallace's wife in the hope of luring the Scots rebel to the town. Well, Wallace took the bait and led an uprising that defeated the entire English garrison and saw the capture of Heselrigg, who was killed personally by Wallace and then dismembered. To have this document confirming these facts is extraordinary and puts into context the uprising around Scotland at that time and the part that Wallace played. After 5 centuries, the book appears to be complete, with 223 leaves written in 2 hands, as well as inscriptions by various owners dating back to Robert Robertoun. Now, Robertoun died in 1568, and the book remained in the Lindsay family library for centuries, for which it is named the Lindisiana Chronicles, and was later in the hands of a bookseller in Northern Ireland until it was bought by the Norwegian bibliophile Martin Schoen at auction in 1990 for £41,000. Remarkably, it retains its original wood and leather binding, one of only a handful of pre-1550 Scottish decorated bindings to survive. It will go under the hammer at Christie's in London on June 11th, 2024, so get your bids in now. And finally, I would like to report that NASA has been approached to help locate the Loch Ness Monster as a new search gets underway from the 30th of May to the 2nd of June 2024. It's actually taking place on the 90th anniversary of Sir Edward Mountain's first official search for Nessie. It's hoped that NASA might have some new advanced imaging technology to scan the loch. Last year saw one of the largest hunts using hydrophones, and strange loud noises were discovered in the depths of the loch, which is one of the deepest at almost 800 feet. It's hoped that NASA has the sophisticated scanners that could help to solve the riddle once and for all. Volunteers are being asked to keep an eye on the surface of the water, looking for breaks or any underwater object gliding along with occasional surface breaks. Nessie hunters can also go out on a boat with Deep Scan Captain Alistair Matheson, the skipper for the Loch Ness project, who, using 18-metre or 60-feet hydrophones, will listen for mysterious sounds echoing from the depths of the loch. It's hoped that this will be the biggest search ever, using new technologies to investigate the deep loch for any monster life form. Well, I think we can all expect the unexpected. Well, folks, that is the end of this May edition of Letter from Scotland in my Unique Scotland podcast series. The next issue will be in August. To ensure you get notification of this podcast, please go to my website exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk, and on the podcast page you'll be able to click on the email subscribe button to register. Now, I've mentioned the itinerary service that I offer as well as my touring service, and I was delighted to catch up with one of my clients who was passing through Edinburgh last week. John Spoden is presently walking the West Highland Way, taking him from Mulgai near Glasgow to Fort William. On completion, he is going to do a short tour north of Scotland before returning home, and asked me to provide an itinerary for the latter part of his journey. So it's great to hear that John was visiting Edinburgh for the day, and I caught up with him and his two friends in the Café Royal Bar in the new town.
Hello, this is John Harbour from Exclusive Scottish Visits, and I'm in the Café Royal in Edinburgh with three lovely friends who've come across all the way from the United States of America. And I've got Andrea, I've got Andy, and I've got John. In fact, it was John Spoden who contacted me initially to do an itinerary for him for his tour of Scotland. So I'll just get them to say hi.
Hi, I'm Andrea.
Hi, I'm John.
And I'm Andy.
And these guys are sitting now here drinking a nice, which pint is it?
We got a shilling, 80 shillings.
80 shillings.
Yeah.
Scotch ale, 80 shillings. Nothing better. Well, John, can you just tell me what is it that brought you to Scotland and why are you here?
Well, I can tell you, Andy brought me to Scotland to walk the West Highland Way. So the three of us are going to be disembarking in a few days to walk the West Highland Way as part of an organized tour. At the end of that, though, we're going to follow an itinerary that John helped put together as we explore the areas outside of the Highlands and north of Scotland. And we've just been so intrigued by this country and just enjoying our first full day here in Edinburgh.
That's great. Where do you come from, Andrea?
I live in Seattle, Washington.
Seattle, John?
Yeah, I live in Seattle. Andrea and I are together.
Right. And Andy?
And I live in a town just outside of Chicago, Joliet, Illinois.
Julia, Illinois. Brilliant. And what actually got you to contact me initially, John?
Well, I think both Andy and I have been listening to your podcast now as we've been preparing for our walk on the West Highland Way. Some of these walks that we've been doing take 3-4 hours to train for this, and your podcasts have just helped us to really come to understand the beauty, not only of the geology and of Scotland, but also the people and the cultural history here.
That's good. Much appreciate that. So there you go, folks. Listen to the podcast, and that might help you as well. And Andy, what was the first idea of coming on the West Highland Way walk?
Well, my father, Andrew Neal, back in 2012, had done this hike, and it's a sponsored trip through the Sierra Club. And if you don't know of the Sierra Club, it's one of the United States' first largest environmental organization that was founded by John Muir, of all people. So along with service trips, that Sierra Club volunteers can come out and help to maintain and build trails in the national parks, public lands. They also sponsor these outings all around the world now. And so I wanted to do this trip since my dad told me about it back in 2012, and now here in 2024, I'm finally going to be able to follow in his footsteps.
Well done, you're here. And of course, for those of you that don't know, John Muir is a great Scot who emigrated to America and lived and was born in Dunbar. And of course, there's a great, the John Muir Way from Dunbar all the way to Helensburgh, which is my old hometown, where I used to live before I moved down to Aberlady. Anyway, well, thank you very much indeed, team. It's great to see you here. And can I just say, have a wonderful time on the West Highland Way and a wonderful time following the wee itinerary that I put together for you. So thank you very much indeed. So bye for now.
Slanjava!
Thank you.
Slanja.
Well, that was John, Andrea and Andy from the US of A. It was great to see them, and I wish them well on this adventure and all their future travels. Well, my next monthly touring podcast will be published in June, and that is the last of my 4-part series on Edinburgh, where you will join me for a walk down Edinburgh's Royal Mile and look into the alleyways or closes. In total, there are up to 100 closes that branch off from the main road that runs from Edinburgh Castle to Holyrood Palace, known as the Royal Mile. These closes are named after important people of Edinburgh or certain businesses, and this podcast will bring the more prominent closes to life, such as Paisley Close, where, in the late 1600s, a young 12-year-old boy, Joseph Macaque, survived the collapse of the building in which he lived, and where half the occupants were killed, yet he was saved by his boots sticking out of the rubble. As always, I have thoroughly enjoyed bringing the snippets of news of Scotland to you, and I hope that through your connection to Scotland, you can relate to some of the items discussed here. I always welcome feedback, so if you wish to comment on any of the issues raised, or if you wish me to cover any aspect of Scottish life, then please do get in touch through the contact page on my website, or send an email to info@exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. But please don't forget, these snippets are commentaries only and do not necessarily reflect my own political leanings or bias or my opinions on any of the topics. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you all listening today, and I would now like to sign off in traditional Scottish fashion by raising a glass to you wherever you are in the world. Slàinte.
You've been listening to the Unique Scotland podcast with exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. To receive all our episodes automatically, please subscribe now.